Thanks for logging on to myfoxhurricane.com. So we're past that peak of the season, September 10th, but we're still in that period where you can expect to see a lot of activity. We talk about this often, the tail end or that second half of the season. It's more backloaded, where we tend to see a lot more of that activity after the peak of the season. So as we head through the latter part of September into October, remember, we saw that with Helene and we saw that with Milton just last year. That was well after the peak of the season. So not to say that we are going to have something like that, but it's a reminder that we can go from these very quiet periods to a lot of activity in a very quick period of time. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. So we've got Hurricane Gabrielle, which still is a major hurricane, winds of 140 miles an hour. It's crossed the northern Atlantic, or at least heading in that direction. So no threat to any land for the time being. But you do have the Azores over here, which they are going to be watching this as we go towards the weekend, because it will weaken, but it still could be a pretty powerful storm that affects them. Now we're watching these two areas which have now been designated as Invest 93 and Invest 94. So the first one, the one that's a bit further to the east, that is Invest 93, up to a 90% chance of development. Then the one that's more towards the west, Invest 94, a 60% chance of development. And it's always a complicated situation when you have two systems that are close to each other in proximity, because how will they interact? Will they interact? If one develops more than the other, quite often you'll see it will cause the other one to dissipate or not nearly develop as much. So it's going to be a pretty complicated development as we go through the next several days. So we will continue to watch this and fine-tune this forecast quite a bit, I think, as we go through the next several days. But zooming in on Hurricane Gabrielle, winds right now still at 140 miles an hour. But the things that we're starting to see happen with this are telling us it's not going to last much longer, because notice beginning part of the loop, you can see it was still a fairly clear eye. As the loop goes on, you're starting to see more and more clouds in the middle of this. You're also noticing it's not as symmetrical, still fairly symmetrical, but you notice right here on this back side, it becoming flattened out. What's happening is those winds, those westerly winds, are now starting to push this storm, so it's going to start to speed up, but it also starts to affect the storm as it's squashing this side. It's not allowing for that outflow on this side of the storm. It's also going to start to blow more of the tops off of the storm, and that's why you're seeing this pattern like this, where you've got this flat edge, and then you've got a lot of these clouds just racing off to the north and the east. So that's at much stronger winds in the upper level of the atmosphere. That's what's picking this system up and starting to speed it up. Now moving to the east-northeast at 20 miles an hour. Winds still at 140, but it will likely start to weaken as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. Then you notice as we head towards the end of the week, there you have the Azores. At this point, still could be a tropical system, might be starting to transition into a non-tropical system. It doesn't really matter if you're talking about 80, 85, 75 mile an hour winds, whatever it's at that point. It is still going to cause some issues, and you can see the cone in there, so there's still a possibility those islands could take a direct hit from this. And then as we head towards the weekend, there we are. It's a non-tropical system, but still some pretty gusty winds as this is heading over towards Portugal and towards Spain as we head into Sunday. So switching gears, now we're looking at these two areas further down in the Atlantic. Remember, this is 93, this is 94. So we have that dry Saharan dust, which is still causing some issues for the first one, 93. We still have some of that dust over 94, but not as much. But you look at this, and there's these little things, these little clues that you start to pick up on. So you notice what's happening with this. A lot of these storms, they are pushing down to the south. That's because these upper level winds, that wind shear is actually shearing this system, and so you get those wispy clouds, you get the storms being displaced To the south, you're not seeing as much of that with this, but we have an upper level low which is spinning right here, and that is giving some shear from the south. We also have an upper level low which is sitting over here to the west of all this. So how are all these things going to start to play in and factor out as we go through the next several days? That's what remains to be seen. So here we're looking at the Fox model as we go through the next couple of days, and you see they stay pretty close to each other all the way through. The Fox model may be indicating that this one here, this 93, may be developing a little bit more, but notice as they head over closer to the Bahamas, we also have this cold front that is pushing down across the southeast, which is, it's good for us because it's going to really help to pick these storms up and turn them more towards the north and not allow them to continue to move towards the west and head towards Florida. But the interaction between these two systems, that may at least partially inhibit these storms from developing, or you may see this one starting to develop more and start to pull some of the moisture and the energy away from this one, and so this one doesn't develop as much. Or it could be vice versa. We could switch this around and we end up seeing this one not develop as much and this one develop more. I can tell you a lot of the models are more bullish on this here, that Invest 93, that one developing, and this one here taking much more time. And it's not until these get further to the north and they start to separate away from each other, that's where we start to see the indications that maybe this one here, that Invest 94, then will finally start to develop a little bit more. Here we're looking at that wind field. This is the peak wind gust over time, and you're seeing more development. So you're seeing those brighter colors in Invest 93. You're not seeing nearly as much of that with the other area, but notice just how close all this is, and that will more than likely play at least some factor in how all this plays out over the next several days. But a very complicated pattern, so we're going to have to watch this and baby this very closely, just simply because this is moving closer to the U.S. and a bit more of a threat than anything that we've seen so far, at least over the past several weeks, and probably the biggest threat that we're going to be dealing with here over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to watch this very closely, and we'll keep you updated right here on myfoxhurricane.com.